Welcome back to the lectures on Public Policy for Sustainable Development, a Gandhian Framework, Part 2. This is under the lecture series of Applied Spirituality and Public and Sustainable Development Policy. In the last part, we discussed that how the Gandhian thoughts like trusteeship model, consensus-based decision making under the decentralized system, and economy of permanence, they are breakthrough in the systems, and how by adopting this framework we can easily achieve SDGs. In fact, all SDGs are embedded under the three concepts which we have discussed in the last part. Now, there are numerous examples that could be illustrated that can symbolize the anti-globalization and protectionism policies. There are stories of decentralized and self-reliance across the world. The survival of economies after the segregation from the globalized interconnected economies in the case of Cuba, which was recently it performed really well after the US embargo in 1960. The United States embargo against Cuba prevented American businesses and businesses with their commercial activities in the US from conducting the trade with Cuban interests. It is the most enduring trade embargo in the modern history. Even though this after the implementation, it is worthwhile quoting that Cuba came out to be most self-reliant in all the sense of energy and trade, and most self-reliant economy it became. Another remarkable example is the Island of Peace, also known as Community of Arc. It was founded in 1948 in France by Lanza de Vasta, who was from 1910 to 1881. Whose entirely influenced and based on Gandhian principle that community was formulated. The community functions on truth, love and tolerance and is a perfect example of simple life. The community is a classic example that preferred the use of simple tools and believed that the complicated machinery and the products would only lead to human greed of more and more, attaining more and more quantities and material gains. It is the simple technology that benefits a worker by constructing their physical, mental and spiritual health, and that too by labor. Labor was the focus in that philosophy, and in this process the community disconnects itself from the modern economy, propagating injustice towards the poor. The modern economy that leads to only injustice for the poor, and the poor are not in the part of the progress, or we fail to include them in the process of transformation or progress, growth. Another example that is worth noticing and illustrating is the point of functioning that is seen in one of the villages of Gonda tribe that is located in the central India. It is named as Meendha village. Though it is very small village and it is a contract, it has no link with the world outside. It has maintained its unique way of functioning. It has a characteristic such as non-existence of disputes, differences of the opinion are almost negligible, no problem related to poverty, hunger, unemployment and economic disparity. In fact, it is unique to see that all these elements, aspects which we talk about in sustainable development goals SDGs, they are almost non-existent in this kind of a community. The village functions effectively based on unanimous decision of village community to make a critical decision of village decisions in this form of school, provision of any public good like school, hospitals or any medical structures or roads, railways, something like all these public necessity goods. But the village assembly, which is called as Gaon Samaj Sabha, that comprises of an adults of the individual or villagers in the as their members, and every villager is counted in it, a representative from every house. In that meeting which is held in this village assembly, it is decided to impose rupees 150 as a practice for cutting trees in the forest for fruits, leaves, and branches, or even honey. The villagers depend completely on the forest for their food and fuel, and they use biogas as a source of energy. Finally, this village serves as a remarkable example of people's power. So one could see that such a village, it is practically possible to function, and it functions in a more sustainable manner better than what we have the urban cities framework, which are large production, large products being floated in the market, large markets and large consumption levels of consumption. A consensus based decision, this decentralized system has definitely lead to a self reliant and self sufficient community. One can easily see that such a system has led to achieving a SDG 11, which is sustainable cities and communities, which one of the very important part or goal of the entire Millennium Sustainable Development Goals, which all societies and countries across the world are aiming to achieve. The other SDG which is achieved here is SDG 12 of responsible consumption and production, as every member in the village of such communities which we have discussed is feels responsible for nature. They feel nature as part of themselves, and they do not feel as something which is out of their perspective or out of their reach. It is their part, and it belongs to them, and it is one of them. So this feeling of connectedness with nature, which leads them to think that nature is one of them, it would definitely help them to differentiate between what they desire and to what extent they should desire. This consciousness of making a decision that how much to desire and to what extent to desire and what to desire, that basic questions are answered in this kind of a framework when you have the liberty to take your own decisions at your own individual level. And when you're taking a decision at individual level, those are transformed decisions, transformed from your self upliftment of moral and ethical, guided by moral and ethical source. Another important aspect of Gandhian thoughts is the education policy. Education policy, which is a building block for the human race, and it is an important aspect of human capital. Nai Talim, education system and education policy, which emerges from the Gandhian perspective, contributes remarkably towards the sustainable development goals. It systematically leads us to achieving the sustainable development goals, and it is a guiding source, and it's a guiding source for leading us to the pathways towards sustainability. Education is the preliminary and the building block for the entire nation. Gandhi's notion on Nai Talim is a remarkable illustration of manifesting the traditional knowledge of spirituality in academics and life skills to in a child. So these aspects, which these terms hold a very important part in the whole structure, that is spirituality, linking spirituality, academics and life skills in a child. So we are not talking about higher education here. We are starting from when the child starts to learn from the surroundings and from the peer groups. So it's the beginning of a child upbringing and the journey which a child would travel and become a responsible human being. In that journey, at the first stage itself, we talk about academics, spirituality, and life skills. Education policy from Gandhian thoughts is a unique method that is designed by Gandhi to train every individual right from its childhood on the true, that is, train them on the true meaning of connection with the ecology, where the student is trained in a sustainable skill manner for life. So it's a learning that students achieves and attains in connection with, in the context with the ecology. At the same time, it also skills himself or herself with the sustainable trainings which will later on give the earning. Basically, it will give life skills for livelihood also. So these skills originate from the philosophy of reducing, reusing, and recycling, and they provide a source of livelihood also for the lifetime. So this kind of a framework that is pedagogy that is introduced from the beginning of the childhood, it will connect its spiritual level to the mental level, the academic level, and the skill that will provide the livelihood for the outer world. So this connecting all three, four aspects together is a remarkable collection of bundle of education good or policy that has been reflected in the Nai Talim system. Gandhi was equally aware of mindful of inculcating, and he was mindful of inculcating good sanitary habits among the people of the community, and that was he was the biggest advocate for the use of biogas manure for cooking and other activities. If your consumption patterns are based on renewable sources of energy that you use for your consumption, and if the source of energy itself is renewable, it can only then give you a sustainable livelihood or a lifestyle. The modern community, biogas plants, and activity functioning in all in the current these models can be easily visualized in the Gandhian ashrams, which are still sustaining them. The ashrams are they are the repositories that are transformed from the human waste into organic first fertilizers. One can visit them and one can visualize that how the organic fertilizers and the human waste are reused for the own consumption over and over again. So the entire cycle gets completed and it is seen to be completed there. Gandhi's reverence for life and respect for animals can never be ignored. It is embedded in the concept of his tolerance and non-violence. Gandhi's entire life functioned much like a ecosystem itself. So basically, ecosystem is nothing out of our system. It is within us. It is a part of us. So the entire life revolves around the ecosystem in where we also exist. It's the other way around. The functioning of the ecosystem includes us, and it is not we including the ecosystem. Gandhi's everyday life, from the prism of every minute, act, motion, and thought, was well placed and it was appropriate, um, uh, well scrutinized on the scales of ethics and morality. When a person lives a life like this, which is guided by spiritual morality and ethics, he's bound to produce less, consume less, and include everyone in the system around, and also include the ecosystem or ecology around that. In the light of the global development agenda that were reflected in goal 4, that is SDG 4 of 2030, that is the agenda of SDG that was adopted in 2015, that is to ensure equity or equitable and inclusive quality of education and promote a lifelong learning opportunities. And related to that, we also introduced National Education Policy of 2020. The goal was to transform the entire system, entire pedagogy, and the pedagogy should result into a more inclusive and equitable system of functioning. So the entire objective is to achieve a kind of lifestyle that incorporates and does not distance ourselves from the entire ecosystem or ecology. We learn from the ecosystem and earn from the ecosystem as a part of our livelihood and lifestyle. With this objective and the entire framework of Nai Talim automatically adapts this kind of a system. So, education policy in India, the pedagogy needs to evolve further so that the education becomes more experimental and fun oriented. It should focus on the character building, manifesting the attributes of empathy, compassion, rationality. And when we talk about empathy, compassion, and rationality, it is not from human to human, it is from human to non human, living and non living species around us. Thus, NEP, National Education Policy, once adopted by India, it consists the elements, substantial components of Nai Talim which can be seen and directly achieves SDG 4, that is 2030. SDG 4, that is to be achieved by 2030, of ensuring inclusive and equitable quality of education and promoting a lifelong learning opportunities for all. Now, the last concept, which is a concept of satyagraha, which is a remarkable concept of functioning a public policy or adapting a policy from the user's point of view. Whenever there is a conflict between a public policy and a user, the beneficiaries, people usually go in for satyagraha. The concept which is very commonly seen everywhere, it is the concept of satyagraha. The most rational and strategic method of dissent that was developed by Gandhian thoughts and eventually propagated in the form of what is known as satyagraha. However, we do not see satyagraha the kind of framework structure it was that time defined or it was visualized. It came out in a very different form, which was not the idea in which it was propagated. Satyagraha was a method of resistance and that does not call for physical force. It is one of the most remarkable method of conflict resolution. The method that is embedded in and inherited in the term satyagraha was mainly the search of truth as a soul. The firmness of holding on to the truth or soul manifests a change of heart. This method of seeking the truth is defined as satyagraha. Genesis or the origin of satyagraha is a supreme concept of the truth. The truth in this context refers to an ultimate form of reality and the ultimate truth, reality. Elementary strategy in the paths that are embedded in the process of satyagraha is the protest against the injustice through a peaceful manner, and that is consistent. The concept of satyagraha pertains to transform inner sense of the other. The preliminary reason for the success of satyagraha is based on the elementary condition, the three elementary conditions. The one who adopts this form of protest should never have hatred in the heart and against the opponent. Secondly, the agenda or the issue that is the concern of the protester is true and substantial. And finally, the satyagrahi must be prepared to suffer till the end of the cause. So it's basically the self sacrifice. It is nothing to be achieved from the outer world, but it is the achievement from the inner world. It is the path towards not only to the individual transformation, but it is a path towards the social transformation. And this transformation, as we started talking about interconnectedness, it is totally embedded in the process of interconnectedness. Negotiation and arbitration dialogues which were developed between the process of satyagraha, it is the understanding of the truth between the satyagrahi and the opponent. Agitation is a situation that is completely avoided and it is condemned, and it's in the viewpoint of people by deploying various methods of communication. Demonstrations and ultimatums and meetings and manifestations and processions, they are can be adopted, and that should lead to self purification, resorting to fasting, public prayers, and these are the methods and the tools which are prescribed under this phenomena. So, self purification is the main focus of Gandhian thoughts, and this will lead to change in heart of others automatically, with the basis and with the rationale that they are interconnected. Once you reach to that level of interconnectedness, it will automatically happen in a larger consciousness or super consciousness. So, the effort is to reach to that level of consciousness that will transform the other, where the other is placed towards a stand that is unethical. Strikes, tools with which they raise the voice against the policymakers, those and other things, other various methods that are adopted, they have to lead to the one common goal, and that goal is the social transformation of all and reach to the interconnectedness of all. So, dharna and other things are also adapted by various forms of satyagraha, like simple sitting down and proving towards the highest effective, and other principles of of dharnas, where uh, people are sitting in a non-violent way and discussing how their goal can be synchronized with the goal of the public policy. So, economic boycott is one of the another way, good way of bringing in the process of satyagraha. It is the most widely adopted in the fact, and it's a form of protest, withdrawing from the businesses, not paying taxes. There are other ways of boycotting. Non-payment of taxes and etc. are very much prevalent across the world, and that leads to that should not result into any non-violent act, because the moment it results into any violent act, it destroys the main purpose of satyagraha. Satyagrahi has to first self-sacrifice his own selfish interests. Only then one can become a true satyagrahi and transform the system. Patience is the key component of this framework, and it is paid the most. A non-cooperation movement of which we witnessed, which was initiated by Mahatma Gandhi, was completely based on self-governance, seeking to withdraw its support from the British reforms. Quit India movement, which was launched, that left India and demanding an end to the British rule in India, was an initiative which was driven by the soul force and not the physical force. The relevance of Gandhian Satyagraha as a tool and a technique for sustainability and successful revolution not only enlightens the inner consciousness of Satyagraha, but also directs the whole society towards the ultimate truth or reality. So, anything that deviates and separates us from the ultimate truth is something for which gives the legitimate stand and legitimate rationale for a dissent. Bardoli movement also we've seen, another satyagraha which Champaran satyagraha. There are various examples we've seen of satyagraha in one form or the other. Civil disobedience was seen, then there are other Dandi satyagraha was seen, then there were other types of satyagraha. So they have been remarkably successful in achieving the sustainable development goals, and these tools are something which are prescribed as the as the tool to bridge the differences and the conflicts, situations of conflicts that come between the policymakers and the individuals. They are systematically defined, and there are some robust tools which are adopted across the world, and they have proved to be resilient and robust in bringing in the achieving the main goal of social upliftment and reaching out to the truth. Now, in the present era, the world is full of hatred, racism, and conflict. Global oppression is defined in the form of soft power, it is not the hard power. However, we have seen the war occurring in multiple times, in the consecutive times, and this we are standing in the times of another war. And if not the arms and the weapons and sacrifice of human value system, it is the name of the politics and subjugation. We face wars all around. Such a world, that order which we have once again witnessing, it needs a revolution to render humanity a path of towards the truth. The study, this particular lecture adopted Gandhian philosophy originating from spirituality to examine whether they can be connected, spirituality could be connected with public policy and sustainable development. We saw that various concepts and in concrete concepts of Gandhian thought, such as trusteeship model, economy of permanence, Sarvodaya, which we discussed in the last part, then Satyagraha, and or decentralized system of governance, consensus-based system of governance, they all lead to one consciousness and the transformation, and that would lead to not only a self-upliftment, individual transformation, but an economic revolution that will bring up the actual form of sustainable development goal. So, an education system, not to forget about the education system that is prescribed by Gandhian thoughts, which is Nai Talim, which is the building block of prescription education of building block for the society, and that creates the character and ethics and morality among the citizens of the world, citizens of a nation, and thus the sustainable development goals are destined to be achieved, and they are that. So, with this, I would like to wind up today's lecture, and thank you so much for listening. Have a nice day.